Hello, hello, Karma. Thank you for joining us today and being part of A Naked Conversation with. For all of those who are unfamiliar with Karma, Karma McCain is an actress who has participated in a ton of interesting films. You can actually find all of her movies on imdb.com, or I'm sorry, imdb.com, and just search for Karma McCain, or you can also find her on Twitter as @Karma McCain. Karma, are you also on Instagram or any other platform where people can find you?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram. My handle there is Karma McCain VIP.
Okay.
I'm not actively posting, which we can actually end up talking about because I've been censored so much. So I've sort of taken a break, but I do have an account on there.
Okay. So yes, I'm sure that there's going to be a ton of really interesting topics to talk about. First of all, Karma, how would you introduce yourself? Who is Karma McCain according to Karma McCain?
Karma McCain, according to Karma McCain, is a human who lives on the planet
Are you
Earth.
sure? Are you sure you're not from
I'm
Mars?
not I'm not totally sure, but as far as I know,
Probably there was a futuristic place in Mars and found a way back in time, and maybe
exactly.
Elon Musk, something like that.
Yes. And who knows how many dimensions we're experiencing at the moment. Right now, I'm in this one experiencing this, but I could be on, Mars experiencing another life right at this
Awesome.
moment. So yeah, so I first and foremost, I guess I'm a mom. My son is 20 now, so he's an adult. I'm using a lot of air quotes today or so far.
Okay, that's
Maybe
fine. No.
that'll be a theme, air quotes. Uh, I have a 20-year-old son. I can't believe I have an adult child. I'm an
Wow.
actor, acting for about 7.5 years. And so it was something I kind of always wanted to get into, and I was raising my son. I was a stay-at-home mom. And then when he was 13, I figured, what, I'm getting older. I might as well do this. My son's old enough now. He doesn't, need as much attention. So let me just go for this. I live in LA. I mean, what better place to get into the business?
Awesome.
So, and then I also consider myself a body diversity and body equality advocate. And that's a whole story in and of
Okay.
itself.
I'm very excited to hear about that. But so you mentioned that you've been acting for the last 7 years. Before that, did you have any type of experience in acting, or did you just wake up one day and say, "Hey, I think I want to be an actress"?
Well, so I don't know. There's a great book called The Artist's Way. And I don't know if you've heard of that book or read it, but I had read that book. And in that book, she helps, any type of artist. But I think it was kind of specifically, her intention to start that book was for people with writers with writer's block, and how to get past it. But she found through her theory that actually you can tap into your creativity in a lot of ways. And what I found, she has something called a shadow artist. And a shadow artist is someone who sees something that they want to do, but they're too afraid to go for it. So they work kind of always behind the scenes, and it's called a shadow artist. So I consider myself a shadow artist. When I first moved to LA, I got into wardrobe styling. So I was behind the scenes, like, doing wardrobe, but always kind of like, ooh, I wonder if the director will look at me, have that like fairy tale. Oh, we see she'd be perfect for the role. Call her over. Like, sort of like fairy tale story. And then I became a makeup artist. And
Hmm.
again, like behind the scenes. So I consider myself to be a shadow artist, someone who's just too afraid to go
Hmm.
for it. And so, yeah, so then, like I said, once I guess I just came to me like, my son's getting old enough now and I'm getting older. Like, if I don't do it now, when will I ever do it? So just
Yeah.
go for it. So I had to kind of put my fears and my ego aside and just decide to do it.
I think it's never late to get started. If I'm not mistaken, Morgan Freeman started probably around his 50s, right?
I'm not sure, but yes, I know there are several actors who started very late,
Hmm.
air quotes, in their career. Late meaning like anyone over 35 is late. Um, so yeah, there are several actors who did start
Which
late.
is
And I agree.
awesome because he's been able to to climb up to a very high profile, high status. He's been in really great movies. So, I mean, if it's something that you really want to do, it's never late to do it, to go for it, right?
I totally agree. Absolutely.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about you growing up. What was your relationship with your body? Did you feel confident about it? Was there something that you didn't like?
Right. So for me, I didn't really think about my body until puberty. And then I became very aware of my body and hyper aware of it because I have very transparent see-through skin. And so my whole body is very veiny, like my legs, my arms, just everywhere is vein. So, you know, before I had, developed and had breasts, like I didn't really notice like my chest area until I developed breasts. And then suddenly my chest was just like full of all these veins. And then I really became, I was like, what is this normal? I don't think I've ever seen anybody else, other women who look like this. So I started paying attention to other women's bodies and specifically their chests to see like, do other women have like really veiny chests? And I never saw anybody else like me. So I started to develop body dysmorphia. I was like, something is wrong with me. I'm really weird. So I covered. I would never, ever have worn a V-neck like this. Like I never wore a shirt below my collarbone. And because I thought something was wrong with me. And so I developed a very, very negative aspect of my body from, I guess, about 14 on. And for most of my adult life, I had body dysmorphic disorder where I went out of my way to keep this area covered. And then also it actually progressed, it got worse. So even as a teenager, even though I had discovered like I had these weird veins, I would still wear shorts and stuff. And then when I got to my 20s, my early 20s, I wouldn't even wear shorts because of my leg veins. And then when I got pregnant, I was very young. I was 23 or 22 rather. Wait, 22, 23. I was 23 when I got pregnant. And so carrying a baby made, I already had poor circulation, made my leg veins even worse. So I would never even expose my legs above the calf. And I lived like that for, really until 2015, like 6 years ago. So I guess from 94 to 2006, 15, I lived like that. So how many years is that? Wow. It's like over 27 years.
And how, other than not wearing specific type of clothes, how else did it negatively impact your lifestyle?
Well, I hated my body, right? So I hated myself. And it was this roller coaster of ups and downs of like some days like, it's not, it's not that, or not even thinking about it or just not paying attention, to days where I literally would just like be looking at myself in the mirror like, I fucking hate you. What's wrong with you? You're disgusting. Yeah. And so that affected my life. I'm sure in many ways I was very reserved. I was very closed off. I wouldn't.
Sure you avoided locker rooms or any place where anyone can see your veins?
Yeah, I definitely would make sure when I used like a gym locker room that I would just, position myself in a way, or, yeah, for sure, cover myself in a way where it wasn't really obvious.
And how did you manage to overcome something so difficult? I think it's like a rabbit hole where you fall deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and getting out becomes more of a challenge each time. So what helped you break through that?
So it was a long process. The first time that I realized that it was actually my frame of mind, I want to say I was in like my mid to late 20s. I think it was like around 26 or 27. I was speaking with this woman. She's like, I'm really into like astrology and tarot cards and all this stuff. And she was kind of a healer in that genre. And I remember she had on like a white button-up shirt, and I could see like a couple veins. And I was like, was like, do I say something to her? Like I was like going through this whole reading with her, and then I was like, God, like I just want to say something. And
Mhm.
so finally I said to her, I'm like, I see you have like some veins there. I'm like, my whole chest is like that. Like, how do you feel about that? Like, are you okay with this? And she was like,
She probably didn't even realize it.
she was just like, this is totally normal.
Yeah.
What you're uncomfortable with yours? And I was like, yeah, I feel like a freak of nature. Like something is wrong with me. Like, how can you be so comfortable with it? And she was like, this is totally normal. It never has bothered me. In fact,
Mhm.
my brothers used to tease me about it, and we'd laugh about it when I was a kid. It was just kind of always a funny thing, and it's not a big deal. She goes, you have body image issues and you need to seek out professional help.
Okay.
And I was like, who is this bitch thinks she is? Like, who is she to tell me?
Excuse me.
I was like, and then afterwards I started to think about it, and I was like, I have body image issues. I was like, no, something's just wrong with me. I don't have body image. But then I really started to think, maybe I do have body image issues. So that was my first insight into actually having some level of consciousness that something wasn't wrong with me, and maybe it was just my mind expressing that. But it took several years after that to really work through it, but that was what got the ball rolling.
So that was the starting point where you realized that maybe there wasn't anything actually wrong with you, and it was just more of the way that you perceived yourself. Did perceiving yourself this way avoid you from seeing other people's bodies, like other women's bodies that might have more visible veins or something like that?
What reframe that question or ask me?
So the question is the fact that you were trying to hide your body in a way making you avoid certain types of activities like going to a locker room or something like that, where you could have been exposed to more people's bodies, like other women's bodies that might have had visible veins like you did. Like, why
Right.
did you think it took you so long to have that interaction or conversation with another woman who had visible veins in order to get that ball rolling?
So I feel like over the years, I probably only saw, I don't even know, maybe one or two women before that maybe
Mhm.
were wearing something that exposed their chest where they actually had that. So I just kind of felt like, oh, we're part of the alien group, or like we're like part of this. Like I just always would be, fascinated and be like, wow, I'm so jealous that she has the nerve to show that because I don't.
Mhm.
So, and it was so, the occurrences of times that had happened were so infrequent that I just really never had the opportunity. It was random people. So I
Yeah,
didn't feel comfortable enough walking up to them and being like, hey,
yeah.
I see, you've got this. So this was the first time that I felt like, yeah, I was in a situation where I was safe enough to ask someone, and we had already built a rapport over the course of that hour that we had been sitting together. And then as far as avoiding stuff, for sure, I would avoid and at a daily basis, I would avoid wearing anything that exposed me. If I ever had to go to like a pool party, because my son, there was a lot of birthday parties where, or take him to the beach. Like for me, those times that I had to wear or like be in a bathing suit or something. First of all, I would tan. I would go to the tanning bed all the time because being tan helps to
Covers them up.
cover.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then once spray tanning came around, spray tanning is like foundation for the whole body. It kind of creates this coat and just sort of evens everything out. It's still visible, but not as much. So I would just kind of fake it, the whole fake it till you make it. I would just, when I had to be in situations where I was in a bathing suit, I would just pretend I was fine. Like I would just pretend I was fine, and I'd be miserable the whole time. I'd be like inside, like cringing, but I'm just like, power through, just, power through. Don't think about it.
Yeah.
But that was also part of the healing process, right? Like that was part of like, once I met this woman and she had expressed to me that I had body image issues, it sort of set me on the path of, I'm going to figure this out. I don't know if she's right,
Yeah.
But now that I have the awareness, I'm going to start to figure this out and see, is it me or is it something is wrong with me?
Yeah. So in a way, you were exposing yourself to your fears, maybe in a way that you felt a little bit more secure, like tanning, so you didn't feel as exposed, but
Yeah.
still you were taking the next step to feel more comfortable. And how did that evolve into now sharing pictures of yourself nude online and talking about body positivity? I mean, that's like a huge jump. It's a drastic change.
Yeah, really. I never, yeah, if someone had said, oh, you're going to be posing nude in 15 years, I'd have been like, "Psh, yeah, what crack are you smoking? Like, come on now. So for me, that progression of wanting to overcome and figure out this situation of how I felt about myself over the years, little by little, it was like chipping away, you know, it was like brick by brick, like, um, you know, finding ways to deal with it and overcome it. And slowly I would like started wearing, you know, a V-neck, a small V-neck shirt, and then it got to more V-neck shirt, but it would still, I would still hide it in a way that I would expose just enough that I felt comfortable with. So yeah, it was little by little progression. And then I had this idea to do, I just was thinking, you know, I can't be the only woman out there who has issues with her body. So I was like, clearly, like there's a lot of trolling and body shaming. And so I had this idea, I want to do a coffee table book of women, tasteful nudes with all different body types, but specifically focusing on women who would be considered different, right? So like, you know, myself, someone with see-through skin, someone who's had a mastectomy, someone who's an amputee, or someone who's disabled and in a wheelchair, or, you know, someone who's a burn victim. I just had this idea. I want to do this beautiful coffee table book with all different body types for with women.
It sounds beautiful. Is it something that you've done already, or?
So, well, no, I haven't. I didn't never end up doing it. What happened was I was like, well, if I'm going to shoot this, I got to have the balls to do it myself and be in it. And, you know, I want to be in it. And so I reached out to a friend of mine who's a photographer. I've known, well, actually, he reached out to me. It was kind of random. He reached out to me randomly and said, hey, do you want to have dinner? We haven't, you know, seen each other in a long time. I was like, yeah, sure. I wasn't even going to bring it up. I had no idea I was going to bring up the book. And then we're sitting there talking throughout dinner, and I don't remember what came up, but I said, hey, I have this idea for a book. And I told him about it, and he's like, oh yeah, that sounds cool. And I was like, well, I want to start with me. And he's like, well, what's wrong with you? Like, that doesn't, and I'm like, well, I don't even remember if I told him. I was like, well, let's just set up a meeting and I'll come, because we were in a restaurant at night, so I couldn't be like, hey, you know, so we'd set up, yeah, let me show you. And I was still really uncomfortable and nervous about it. So we'd set up a second meeting to meet at his office. And then when I went to the office and I showed, like, I was like, so I'm really veiny, and it's like, it's everywhere. It's especially over my chest and my breast. That's what bothers me the most. And he's like, all right, well, let's see. And I show him, and he's like, what are you talking about? This is so beautiful. Like,
it's like,
that's,
really?
he's like, yeah, he's like, that's not, he's like, what? He's like, this is not even a big deal. And I was like, what are you talking about? This is like a huge deal. And so
it is.
yeah, so that led to us doing, he said, well, let's go ahead and shoot, let's go ahead and shoot you. Let's shoot you. Let's try and capture these veins that you're so insecure about and do this. And so within like a week or something, we did the first shoot. And so what ended up happening is it kind of became,
are these photos available on your Twitter or something? Is there a place where we can find them?
So on Instagram, and I actually have a Facebook page that also is connected to the Instagram. But all of the pictures are on Instagram, and I talk about my story. So some of the pictures are up there, but not all of them. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm interested in finding them. Just because, I'm curious to see what were those first steps that you took? Because
Right.
from there on, you'll tell us in a moment, but from there on, it seems like that helped.
Right. So the first shoot was nerve wracking. I was very nervous, but also like, let's do this. Once I kind of set my mind to something, I'm like, again, like it's like being back on the beach in a bathing suit. I'm like, don't think about it, just do it. No matter how much inside I was like, ugh, cringing. It's just like, just go for it. Don't think about it, just do it. And so, yeah, so the first shoot was great. It was a huge hurdle for me. I will say my veins don't show up on camera that well, which is ironic because all these years of like me like freaking out about them, they're actually hard to capture on camera. Like, it has to just be the right light and the right angles and stuff. So it was really kind of ironic that here we were doing the shoot to capture my veins, and they were somewhat tricky to capture. But yeah, that first shoot led to a second shoot and to a third shoot. And so I ended up it was so cathartic and healing for me that kind of became more of a focus over the coffee table book. So that's why the coffee table book didn't happen.
Do you ever
And then,
plan on getting back to that idea? Sounds like a great idea.
I would love to. I think the thing that I realized too was like the cost that would take to do that versus social media is free. It can just be posted on social media. And that's the thing too. I didn't post my pictures. My first photo shoot was in 2015. I didn't post my first picture until 2018. So it still was several years before I was even ready to put my photos out there or start talking about my situation publicly. So it was still a process for several more years.
Wow. And how do you feel about your veins now?
I love them.
I'm glad to hear that.
I love them. I'm like, it's like 2020 hindsight's, not fun, because I'm like, gosh, all those years I wasted hating myself. Like, ugh, what a waste of time. I mean, of course, it's, I now have this experience that I can share with other people. And I know through my story, just the feedback that I've gotten on social media has helped other people as well. I've gotten so many messages like, thank you so much for talking about this. And I've got this thing. So many people have their thing that they're just so ashamed of. And basically, so many people have body dysmorphia. They just didn't know it was body dysmorphia. They didn't know there was a name for it. And they didn't really know there was anything wrong with, again, like kind of like myself. Like, I didn't know there was anything wrong with the way I thought. I just thought this thing is wrong with me. It's me. And there's so many people out there like that who have something.
What do you think causes this body dysmorphia? Is it maybe a unrealistic image of people's bodies through media or expectations, or
Yeah.
what do you think
You cut
causes
out.
it?
What was the last part you cut out, or what?
I mean, I'm just thinking out loud, but do you think it has something to do with an unrealistic beauty standard that we've been fed, or maybe unrealistic expectations, or something that happens in our mind? Like I'm not sure if you're able to answer the question, but how does one fall into body dysmorphia?
I feel like it's all of the above, everything you said. For sure, mass media is a huge part of how we see ourselves, because we're force-fed perfect people who are not perfect at all. They're airbrushed, they're photoshopped, they're, now it's all these Facetune, like all these apps to literally just alter your appearance and filter yourself however you want. So yes, mass media for sure. This standard of celebrities and wanting to look perfect, or alter yourself with plastic surgery or fillers, or aging is another one. Mass media is a huge part of it, absolutely, hands down. With that said, if you look at beauty trends throughout history, historically, there's always these things that are in, and people strive for that. So for whatever reason, society, even before media, right? Even before media, you had like, whatever trend, it was, you can go back and look at history. It's pretty interesting. Some of them are pretty comical, actually, some of the trends throughout the years. But so even before that, like we've always sort of agreed upon as a society, we've agreed upon this thing that's considered beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And then people strive for that. So why is that? That I can't answer. I don't know if it's because it goes back to humans wanting to feel connected and feel like they fit in and feel like they're wanted and needed and loved and acceptance.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have seen some statues of the first statues of Venus or something like that. It's like a bigger body size woman that seems to be pregnant, and those were like the high standards of beauty. And then if you go back to medieval times, since the kings and the queens, the royalty were the only ones that were able to overfeed, they wanted to look bigger, like chubbier. And then you go through time, and then now it's super thin, and then super athletic, and then super unproportionate body, like huge breast, super thin, and then huge rear end or butt. And it's like, but what's really sad about it is these trends they last less time over time. So maybe now having big lips is the thing, and then people go through surgery to have big lips, but then the next thing is having natural lips. So it's like people can't keep up with these beauty standards, and I think they shouldn't. And that's also evolving. I've seen like Dove commercials where they show all sorts of body types. There's also a trend in the adult industry, for example. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Sarah Lust, or I think her name's Sarah Lust. I'm not sure what her name is, but she's a producer of adult films. Erica Lust, of course. Yeah. And she's also searching for different body types, but also at the same time following certain trends, like big penises, for example, or thin women, or so we're searching for diversity, but sometimes we fall in the same mistakes. And it's also interesting that you're part of an industry that in a way has perpetrated this. But do you think the industry is trying to change?
I feel like wherever the money is where change happens. And how that happens is, I don't even know, like, if enough people, how does that even happen, right? Because like you said, Dove, there are certain companies who have campaigns now that are promoting diversity and different body types. And so how did Dove, I'd be curious to actually know, how did Dove, because they've been doing it for years. They were kind of one of the first, I feel like, campaigns on this. Like, how did they decide to start doing that, right? And now, as we see on social media, like, body positivity is definitely trending. It's definitely a thing. There's a ton of body positive influencers out there, which is great. And so, once there's enough people and enough eyes, then of course it becomes about marketing and money. Yeah. So I think there is definitely a trend. And of course we have diversity within, the entertainment business, right? We're seeing a whole change between the Me Too movement and the BLM movement. Like, we need more diversity in general. And so that is changing too. So yeah.
How does the industry, the entertainment industry, view the nude body? What has been your experiences with nudity on set, and how do other people perceive it?
So it's interesting. There's actually a great documentary about the history of nudity in film, and it's been interesting to see how it's gone. So the takeaway that I sort of got from it was, back in, I think it was like the 80s, the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, you basically, as a female, had to show your breasts. Like, it was very common that you just do it. And there's no, if you don't do it, the role's going to somebody else. Whereas now it's very, very different from that. I feel like women, actresses have a lot more power in that regard to say, no nudity. They have no nudity clause, and they just get a body double. So it's definitely shifted. I feel like nudity is still shamed in so many ways that it really comes down to, I feel like, individual people's perceptions. Some people still see nudity as just cheap, and your standards aren't as high, and other people see it as, well, that's the art, you do it for the art. Is it gratuitous nudity, or is it not gratuitous? There's so many like
Yeah.
weird little nuances, I feel like, within that.
Well, I think maybe just adding a little bit to that thought, people probably feel like just being naked is an easy, cheap way to get attention versus actually having talent. But I think that that also comes from a very negative perspective of the body, and also it turns the body into a commodity. So it's dehumanizing up to a certain point.
Yeah, I for sure agree. I feel like people, yeah, definitely see nudity as, yeah, it's like, oh, right, how to get attention, how to be seen. Um, and there is so much negativity attached to nudity, which is also what I found through, shooting all these nudes and then also sharing this stuff on social media. What I found is there are a lot of people very uncomfortable with nudity and their
Yes.
bodies. And that's when I started to really think, like, why is there so much shame? Why is there so much negativity and uh uncomfortable? Why are people so uncomfortable with nudity? Because nude is
Well,
normal. And normalize nudity. Like, we come into this world nude. We're not born with clothes on. So like,
yeah.
how?
Well, I'm just speculating here, but I think that it probably has to do that we've been taught over like our entire lives to hate our bodies and to hate ourselves. So we kind of expect others to do the same. And when we see someone who feels comfortable in their skin and they're nude and they're proud, and that probably upsets people because they're like, if I'm miserable, why aren't you miserable? And that might be like a defensive first reaction, but as you mentioned, maybe as time goes by and they're exposed to more nudity, they start to question why they feel so uncomfortable with it, and if it's something that they probably have a problem with themselves. That could be it, but then again, I'm just making this up.
Well, I agree. I feel like there's a couple factors. Religion's a huge one. Religion is a huge factor into shaming nudity and being ashamed of your body, right? Because people see it as like, it's sinful. It's like to show your body to other people, unless you're in a, loving monogamous relationship, then like,
Mhm.
you're a bad person, basically. That kind of equate it to like, or you're just trying to get attention, you're just seeking. So I feel like religion is a huge part of it. And along with what you said, we're just taught from such a young age to keep our bodies covered and hidden, or we're going to get like, don't show your body, or someone's going to try and
Yeah.
hurt you. um and then also through the media, like staying covered, because we're literally ashamed that we don't look like these people that
Yeah,
we see.
I've studied a little bit of the Judeo-Christian view of nudity, and I think some of it has to do with the misinterpretation and how, what they were taught has evolved through time. So sometimes it's not necessarily that religion itself teaches body shame, but more like the way that people have interpreted through time has turned into something that promotes shame. So a lot of people, at least here, for example, in Mexico, people are very Catholic, very Catholic. But when you talk about religion and more about what they were taught, they don't know much more than what they heard someone else repeat. So they don't really go into it. They don't really study it. They don't really question it. And I think that that's what we need to do, get people to start questioning where their their perceived negative image of the body comes from. And I feel like another way that we can change that is through exposure. So what you're doing and what other people are doing of exposing their bodies and their insecurities is starting a lot of reflection and conversation, which I feel in the long term is going to be beneficial to society in general.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like, you know, well, as far as the religious thing, there are so many religions around the world, and I can only speak from I'm not religious. I
Yeah.
wasn't raised with religion.
Mhm.
My grandparents were religion. They were Catholic and Christian, but I personally, my parents didn't raise me with any religion. So I will just disclose that. I will
Mhm.
say my own experience of receiving messages from people around the world from different faiths and cultures. You know, I've gotten their feedback, so I only really have my own perception to go on of stuff I've received. And so, yeah, I think some religions literally shun showing any part of the body
Yeah.
aside from our face and our hands. And then there's all
Yes.
different levels, right? From that to I guess, dressing, how we dress in Western civilization. Um, but yeah, like, and the thing is too, is each society does have their own cultural standards of, like, it's very different in America than it is in, say, India
Mhm.
or in the Saudi Arabia, or I guess even like each culture has their own perceptions. So that's interesting too. And like,
I would say
we
each state. You're from California, right? You live in California.
I live in California. Yeah.
So I
I'm
remember
from
when I went to California, I was there for a month in San Diego, and I was surprised by many things. One of them is how little women wear in public, which was a great surprise because they don't fear harassment like they do here in Mexico. Sexual harassment is a big deal. With the Me Too movement, I think it's been improving, but it's still really, really bad. And that was something that was a pleasant surprise. We spend time in Black's Beach. I don't know if you've been there.
I haven't. Oh, that's a nude beach, but I
It's a
haven't
new
been there.
beach. It's a great beach. I love it. I would highly recommend it. But I was also shocked how much plastic surgery was there. Like we would see, out of 10 people, 8 people clearly had plastic surgery. One you weren't very sure, and then the remaining one was natural. So so it's, if you're exposed to that all the time, it's common to feel bad about yourself. Like I wasn't overweight back then, but I saw myself and I was like, there's clearly something wrong with me because I don't look like them.
Yeah. Yeah, it is this weird catch 22 of really finding peace with ourselves and our own bodies, right? Because the comparison trick, like the comparison, if we compare ourselves, there's always going to be someone who's, what do they say, who's smarter than us, richer than us, younger than us,
Yeah,
whatever. There's always going to be that. So really, it's finding peace within ourselves of being okay with where we are, whatever stage in life and our bodies, because there's always going to be someone who we're like, oh my gosh, well, I don't look like that,
yeah,
or whatever. So yeah, it is hard though to be around. If you're at a beach and like, yeah, 8 out of 10 people are like, what, perfect or like flawless, and you're just like, well, what? I've got cellulite. Should I not have cellulite?
yeah.
And that's where the body positivity community really is starting to, I feel like, influence how we think and our frame of minds, because so many of these influencers are posting pictures of like their cellulite and their, whatever, their stomachs and whatever it may be, because there's so many different variables of humans out there,
Mhm.
and they're all normal, right? So it's just wrapping our heads around, like, we are all normal, we are all okay, no matter what.
Yeah,
And I
I
think that's
agree.
hard for a lot of people to grasp.
I agree. And there's also all sorts of distortions of the idea of body positivity. It's something I posted about a couple of weeks ago. We had a very unhealthy lifestyle. And I think that's great. I honestly think that people should have the ability to choose whether they want to be healthy or not. And if they don't want to be healthy and they're willing to go through the consequences of not being healthy, that's great. I don't think anyone should shame them for that. But on the other side, we decided to do a couple of changes in our lifestyle, and over time, you can see the difference in your body. And I thought to myself, it's like, well, is being fit or seeking a fit body going against body positivity? And the conclusion is obviously not. Like, I think that even if you want to modify your body, you want to, tattoos, plastic surgery, piercings, whatever you want to do, it's your body. And as long as you feel comfortable and you're not hurting anyone else, why do people care? Like, it's none of their business.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. You look, like, it's so easy to judge, right? It's so easy to look at someone and judge, I have a friend who has had a lot of plastic surgery, and she almost looks like an anime character in real life. Like, she's gorgeous. And we've had this conversation about body dysmorphia, because she's like, I can't stop. Once I do one thing, I just want the next thing. Right. So I feel like, of course, it's our bodies. And same with, when it comes to working out or not working out and how we choose to live our daily life, of course, ultimately it's up to us and what we're comfortable with. And I would just say, as far as we never know what's going on with somebody else. It really comes back to judgment and not judging what we see, because we really truly never know where someone is. Like, I had a concussion last December 2019. So a year and 3 months. And since my concussion, I've gained, like, I don't know, over 15 pounds. And so, and I'm still, like, I guess what would be considered like a thin or average person. But if someone didn't know me and they're like, wow, you've gained some weight. Like, we just never know. Someone has thyroid problems and they can't, or they have to be on steroids because they've got an autoimmune disease and they can't, and that causes them to gain weight. Like, we just never know people's stories. Or even with the plastic surgery thing, maybe somebody had a horrible car accident. And there really doesn't need to be a reason why
course
someone's the way they are. I feel like it's really us just changing our frame of mind and accepting people for who they are, wherever they are at. And then that in turn creates acceptance within ourselves. And then ultimately, the more we accept each other, the more as we can grow as a society as a whole, and not have these standards about how we're supposed to look or how they're supposed to look. And ultimately that will breed self-confidence and sort of get out of, this is like a crazy dream to think, like, or, it's like, that would be my dream. Like, everybody on the planet is accepting of everybody else. Then we could truly live in peace and harmony. Like, so.
Sounds like I have a dream.
I have a dream. I do. So really it's, stepping outside of judgments and being in acceptance, not only of ourselves, but whoever we encounter. And look, do I do that all the time? No, because I'm learning. That's my goal, to be like that. But I'm not there yet, but I try my best to do that. And then see myself in judgment. I try to call myself out on it and be like, okay, no, we're in judgment. Why are we judging? Because judgment is a reflection of ourselves. Judgment is a reflection of our own flaws within ourselves. It's never about the other person. It's about our own lack within ourselves.
I agree. So, changing slightly on topic, do you consider yourself to be a nudist or a naturist?
I'm not sure how to answer that. Maybe you can help me answer that. I definitely support nudism. It's changed my life. So I am definitely on board with nudism. It got me, it helped me overcome body dysmorphia that I had for over 27 years. So I am a strong advocate for nudity and people shooting nudes. People with body dysmorphia, I suggest they shoot artistic nudes with someone that they trust and are comfortable with. On the other side, I love clothes. I love wearing clothes. Even if I'm home alone, I'll usually have clothes on. I'm not usually walking around nude, and it's not because I'm uncomfortable being nude anymore. I'm totally fine with it. Clothes for me are an expression, and it gives me an opportunity it's an art form. It's an art form where I get to be like, what am I in the mood for today? What do I feel like today? And so So yeah, I don't necessarily choose nudity over clothes, but I am strongly for nudity.
Are there certain circumstances where you prefer to be nude? Like, I don't know, maybe do you spend time after getting out of the shower naked, or do you like to go skinny dipping, or anything that you prefer to do nude?
Yeah. So I think for me, I'm still in that process of growing in that way. And now that I've been more exposed to the nudity community, like through yourself, for example, and some other folks on Twitter, I am definitely more open now to exploring that further. Of course, COVID happened. And so there's
Yeah.
been the pandemic the last like year. And so that's kind of changed things too. But yeah, I definitely would like to be able to, I think it'd be great to be able to go to the beach and just be able to take all my clothes off
It is
and
great.
yeah, and just be like, hey, what's up? And so I've gone to the beach quite a bit during COVID because it's been a great way to reset and be in nature. And there were times that I was like, gosh, I wish I could just take all my clothes off, and I can't. I'd get arrested.
Well, you could go to Black's Beach and that's not a problem.
Yeah, right. For sure. I'm gonna have to, that's definitely gonna be on the agenda to go check that out. That's a couple hours,
The
I think.
sunsets are gorgeous. Like, when you see a sunset, well, down on the beach it's great, but also where the parking area is at, since it's on top of the cliff, so you could see, like, it's the cliff, then you see the ocean, and then you
Wow.
see like the sun going down. It's beautiful.
It sounds awesome.
It's absolutely beautiful, and if you can do it nude, it's even better.
You're right. Sounds awesome. So yeah, so I'm actually definitely more open to exploring that once things sort of go back to like a normal way of life.
Mhm.
I definitely would be more open and curious to explore
Would
the
you be
new.
interested in the social aspect of nudism or naturism, like being able to hang out with other people naked?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, for sure.
And how did you discover the community? Was it because you had all of a sudden a lot of free time at home and you were on Twitter and maybe you discovered a couple of naked, crazy people?
Yeah, right. I think my first exposure was shortly after I started posting on social media. So sometime in 2018, I encountered a follower who was a nudist, and so I followed him and his wife. I followed them back, so I'd sort of keep an eye on their account and see what they posted, and then once I left or stopped posting on Instagram and started focusing more on Twitter, then yeah, I feel like you were a huge part of that. Because seeing your posts and also
Yeah.
your campaign, my first exposure really to you was when you reached out to me to do part of the picture. It was like you did
Mhm.
the picture thing. And that's when I was like, oh, this is cool. This is really cool. I love that there is this community out there that you're part of and that you're sort of spearheading, and there's so much positivity around it, and bringing normalized nudity. It's like bringing normalcy to something that is normal.
Yeah,
So yeah.
well, it's something that should be considered normal, but I think we've dressed ourselves with taboos, with prejudice here. I don't know if that English is not my first language, so if I say something funny, you can correct me. Um, but we're not really, I think the clothing is just a reflection of, our insecurities, the way that we were taught to see the world and things like that. I understand that there's a practical use for clothing, and I understand that not everyone wants to be naked all the time, but not having the option is shocking to me. Like, and it was shocking since my first experience during a World Naked Bike ride here in Guadalajara. It's like it never occurred to me that you could simply not wear any clothes and you could ride around the city and it wasn't a big deal and everyone was having a great time. And like just the idea of not being able to do that was very frustrating. Like I wasn't willing to wait another year to experience something like that. It's crazy. And it was just it completely blew my mind that I didn't know about it before then, and that millions of people don't know about it today.
The bike ride, and specifically the bike ride,
Oh,
or
no, no,
just
no, not the bike ride specifically. Not having to wear clothes. That
clothes?
that there's an option, like because before then, like the idea of not wearing clothes just it didn't exist in my mind because it's just it's just the way that things are. But when I discovered this experience, it's like, I can't believe people don't know that they can't wear any clothes on. And it's funny because, we're born naked.
Yeah, right. Well, and for me, growing up here in the States, the way that, you know, and I was born in 76, so I'm 44, I'll be 45 this year. And so I grew up really watching movies in the 80s and 90s. And whenever they would show nudists, they were always the weirdos.
Yeah.
In movies, nudists are always the freaky weirdos. Oh my God, look, there's the nudist camp.
I think it's still that way.
Right. So it's very much, and that goes back to, right, like how nudism is portrayed and how society thinks about it. So as long as these stories keep getting told, the general public is going to kind of think like that, right? So, I mean, we do have social media, and obviously that influences people a lot as well. So there's, it's a way to get more awareness out there more quickly about normalizing nudity. But I think, in general, it's still kind of portrayed as like, oh, look, the freaks over there at the nudist camp.
And it's really difficult to change that view, because anytime you talk about nudity, you show nudity, or anything related to nudity, you're censored from social media. Like, even these podcasts, like where we're talking to people and just everyone's dressed and we're talking about nudity, but like the word nudity causes YouTube's algorithm to freak out. And I've had thumbnails taken down. I've had videos restricted. Like, they haven't been taken down, the videos itself, yet, but the audience restriction, like, is there anything that we're saying in this conversation that can inherently damage children? Like, really?
Yeah, wow, that's crazy. And even like, that's why, I try not to cuss even, because I was like, I know this is going on YouTube, so I'm going to spell out the B word, so that the algorithms, it's so funny because on Clubhouse, which I was telling you about, there's this great, one of the women who actually helped create it, it's all these tech people, and she was like, if you're trying to be an influencer, algorithms are your boss.
Yeah.
And I was like,
oh yeah,
right, like, it's just, AI is here and it is in full force, way more than we know. And algorithms, they control pretty much everything. And what we see, right? If you go on Google, I don't use Google anymore, I use DuckDuckGo, but let's say I did use Google. You go on Google and you search nudity, and I go on Google and I search nudity, we're both going to get two completely different lists of links that come up. So the algorithm thing is definitely a crazy thing to think about. But also, like, why would that be censored with nothing even showing? Like, just the fact the conversation is being censored is like mind-blowing. Like, that's really crazy to me. And what for? Why is there so?
And the thing is, they're trying to protect children, but what they're actually doing is damaging them, because they're maintaining this negative image of the body. And it's funny because you try to protect someone to avoid from producing harm, but this negative image of the human body is more harmful than any nude. Like, if, I don't know, it's stupid.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely backwards, and it goes the same for female censorship, right? Because as you know, well, I don't know how it is in Guadalajara, but here in the States, in most states, there are a handful where women can legally bare their breasts, but not many, right? Whereas men can go out and they can ride their bike, they can jog, they can do whatever they want without a shirt. They can go to the beach and just have shorts on. We cannot do that, females. And they say, it's, we're protecting. Well, like you said, like, no, what you're teaching young girls to be ashamed of their bodies from the time they're, toddlers and up. And or maybe not toddlers, because I think, it's probably about 6 or 7 when it's like no longer acceptable for a child to,
and you're teaching boys that they're asking for it because they're exposing their skin, which is inherently sexual. So, she wants something.
Right. And so, it's counterintuitive. What we're actually doing is exactly what you said. We're not only teaching people to inherently be ashamed, but we're actually creating more of a desire.
Yeah.
Like keeping something, you know, I don't want to use the word like sinful, but basically keeping something, you know, hidden in a
Like
way,
provision.
it creates more desire.
Yeah.
And it creates, yeah, it's such a weird backwards
But
counter to.
maybe that has a positive effect on advertising, because it's funny, you can't show the body when it's nude, unsexualized, but you can hypersexualize the body for advertising, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Like music videos and
Yeah.
things like that, they're extremely hypersexualized, and that's fine. Like that's perfectly normal. Like no harm there. But when you want to show the body in its natural form, then okay, that now we have a problem.
Yeah, right. For sure. What does that tell? What does that tell? What is that? What does that tell kids? What does that tell teenagers?
And
What
if
does
we're
that tell?
talking about damage, like what causes more damage than unrealistic beauty standards?
Hmm,
Like having people hate themselves, having people put themselves through very dangerous procedures in order to look like someone else that doesn't even look like that. It's like
yeah.
I used to say that like not even Jennifer Lopez looks like Jennifer Lopez. Like you see her in person and nothing, it has nothing to do with what you see on TV or advertising or anywhere else. So it's like you're putting yourself at risk, your health at risk, in order to look like someone who doesn't really look like that.
Right. Well, I mean, the bottom line is money, right? The bottom line is money. If you keep people unhappy and striving for something, they will continue to spend money. And so money, I feel like has a lot to do with it, a lot.
But we can also use the opposite. Like there's a ton of money in self-development. There's a ton of money in positivity and feeling better about yourself and being happy and wellness and mindfulness and all that stuff. So it's like I don't think money itself is a problem. It's just the way that we have created the system to produce that money. Like making people feel unhappy with themselves allows you to sell a lot of crap. Like a
That's what I
lot of
mean. Yeah, not money itself. Money
yeah.
itself is not inherently bad. I was saying more. What I meant was exactly what you were saying. Is that corporations see dollar signs. If there's
Yeah.
dollar signs, they're gonna keep, as long as someone sees dollar signs keep coming, they're gonna continue doing what they're doing. Once those dollars stop, that's when stuff starts to change. Right. And so going back to like Dove, like what is it that caused Dove? Because the dollars hadn't really, I feel like when Dove got in on this sort of body positivity thing, they were one of the front runners of it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure their money, you know, they didn't have dollars stop coming in. They just actively made a choice to start changing. So that's interesting to me. Whereas,
But it
you
also
know,
has a monetary incentive. It's probably standing out or something, like doing something different. Or maybe they saw a trend, something that was going to happen. Like
yeah,
someone predicted that this is going to be the thing of the future, and they were willing to take the risk. And maybe now it's paying off.
yeah, for sure. They realized like, oh, not everybody wants to see perfectly airbrushed bodies. Some people want to see real bodies, you know, unaltered by Photoshop or what have you.
And I think eventually naturism will become a trend. Like I think people are going to be fed up with all these unrealistic beauty standards, with all these Instagram filters, with all this fakeness. Like I think we get tired of seeing things that are artificial, and then maybe someday we'll want to see things that are real. And I think the podcast format is a great example of that. The podcast is one of the most realistic, raw ways of seeing the other person. Like, for example, the Joe Rogan podcast. I love how in 3 hours you get to meet someone that you would probably never have met if they didn't have that format. So it's more of a raw format. It's not an edited, it's not a polish. It's just the way it is. And if that is becoming a trend, I think other things that are similar are going to become a trend. And eventually, I think nudism, naturism, body positivity, and all these things are going to become like really, really popular. And, you know, I mean, it's going to be great for us as a community, of course. We're going to be very happy. And I think that might make nudism profitable. if nudism, naturism is profitable, then that's when corporations start putting advertising dollars into this, because they're seeing that it's becoming very successful, and that's going to cause it to grow. But we don't know what's going to happen after that. Sometimes, like in the 70s, nudity wasn't that big of a deal. Like there were more of these open movements like the hippies and things like that. But then we became very, very prudish. And then what's next? I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. I do feel like, yeah, I agree with you. Like the more that it becomes normalized and the more that people are doing it and the more that companies see that there's a profit to be made, for sure. And, I feel like luckily we have the internet now, we have social media, social media can be quite damaging in its own ways, but if we're using it to get the word out there and promote it in a positive way, then that's a great way to take advantage of that and use it to further the cause.
So at the beginning of our conversation, you were going to tell us a story about your experience with censorship on social media, and that was part of the reason why you no longer post on Instagram. So what's the story?
Right. So once I started posting my photographs and sharing my story about, my body dysmorphia and how it led, me through out of it, actually through shooting nudes led me out of it. I started to post more and more risque photos, I guess, or just the photos that exposed more. But I would always censor them. I would always follow their community guidelines, and I would always censor out my nipples.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I would still get photographs pulled down. Their bots would just, and it progressed over time. Like, their bots, they've just gotten way more censored over the last couple years from when I first started. And so I just found like being censored time after time after time after time. Finally, they ended up pulling down one of my main account. My main account was my acting account, where I started actually posting all of these pictures. And then I decided I'd branch off and keep the nudes separate from my acting stuff. My acting account, they ended up pulling down. I still don't even know why they pulled it down, because I stopped posting my nudes there, but I had like over 27,000 followers, and they just totally shut it down, just shut my account down. And I thought, I'm done. I'm done with these algorithms being my boss. They are not the boss of me. And so I just thought, I've been wanting to take a break from Facebook and Instagram and that whole conglomerate, because it's so skewed by algorithms, right? Like, even though I'm following their community guidelines, I'm still being pulled down and censored. And then this also led me to realizing, why is the female nipple so offensive?
Why is it so dangerous?
Why is this, like, you can literally go on Instagram and see pictures of people who have been murdered and like mass shootings and stuff, but like the female nipple is what you're pulling down? Like, are you for real? Come on. So it really got me thinking about female equality and just how women are still really repressed and how we're still sexualized. Like, even if it's a natural circumstance, even if it's not in a sexual orientation, the female breast is still totally censored. And I was like, why is that? Because, a lot of times male nipples look just like female nipples, and a lot of men actually have breasts, like, and you really can't tell, like, if you cut off the head, sometimes you can't tell the difference.
I think it's completely arbitrary. I don't think there's anything inherently sexual of women's breasts versus men's chest. I don't think that, I think it was something that arbitrarily evolved to that. And now that's the way we see it, and questioning it, like, it makes no sense. It's arbitrary.
It makes no sense. And so that's really how I sort of became a body equality advocate. I really, I'm not sure what my next step in that regard is. I just know that women are not truly equal in the United States until we have the same right to choose as men. Doesn't mean, just like not all men choose to walk around or jog or be out without a shirt on, not all women would choose that either, but we deserve the right to choose,
Of course.
period.
So that brings me to my next question. How do you think naturism can contribute to improving society?
Well, I really feel like it just normalizes it, right? Like it helps people to see it's not, there's two categories. Of course, there's nudity and then there's sexual nudity. And they're two completely separate things. And so, it's just like there's artistic nudes and there's pornography, there's pornographic nudes. It's like there's two different categories. And so to me, naturism helps to promote, like, nudism isn't inherently sexual. It's being sexualized, like you said, through music videos and through, or like Carl's Jr. commercials. Like you can have this crazy, hot, sexy woman eating a burger, but like if Carl's Jr. wanted to have a woman in the park walking nude, just like, hey, we're eating our Carl's Jr. burger. No, that wouldn't be allowed. So to me, it's about helping to just take away the sexuality, take the sexuality out of it, and just bring it back to nature, like how we are as human beings.
And I think that also comes from an idea that sexuality itself is inherently evil, and that's also not the case.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we're going to normalize sexuality before we normalize the human body, like non-sexual. The reason why I focused my attention on non-sexual nudity is because I feel like it allows more people to enjoy the benefits of it. And as soon as you sexualize it, you're segregating a great part of the population, children, for example. Or if we're talking about sexuality, what type of sexuality are we talking about? And since there's so much, I think it just segmentates. And what I would like to accomplish is to allow more and more people to have the opportunity to enjoy the benefits of simply being nude.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And how do you do that?
I think it's a work in progress. I don't know. I don't think that there's like a step one, step two, step three, but I think creating exposure. First of all, creating enough content that can educate people, creating enough diversity in the community, like inspiring more people to share their experience. And that also allows more people to identify with someone. Like, for example, I'm a Mexican male, and I think I have a limited impact when it comes to women, for example. I have a really hard time reaching women because I'm not a woman. So we need women to do that. Or, I think that maybe, well, the problem in naturism tends to be that it's more of an older generation versus a younger generation. For example, I'm younger, so when we started promoting our community, we started attracting more of the 25 to 35 age demographic, which is a demographic that has been historically low in naturism. So I think that the more people that we have as a reference, the more community in general. But I also feel like the next step is doing things publicly. Like, I think that, for example, the World Naked Bike Ride, or the LGBT, the Pride, or for example, the Day of Women, like the Feminist March, and all these type of public displays are very important because they really help start a conversation, and they help expose people to a reality. And sometimes it's a very uncomfortable reality when it comes to society. So the more that they're exposed to this, the more that it becomes normalized. Like, I remember that maybe about 15 years ago, seeing two men holding their hands or two women holding their hands in public was completely, like, you couldn't imagine seeing that. And now it's completely normal. And that happened through exposure. So I think exposure is another thing. I also feel like we need to have stronger institutions. We need, naturism historically has had pretty crappy institutions because the people who started them in the 70s are still the people that are leading them. There's nothing wrong with older people leading a movement, but they didn't want to evolve. They didn't want to have younger leaderships. They didn't want to modernize. So now, like, they're completely irrelevant. And there's so many things that they could be doing to educate society, and it's frustrating to see that they're not doing anything. So, I don't know. I'm experimenting and playing around with everything I can, and something might work.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you really made me think too, like speaking of all these, like the bike ride was specific for nudity. But when I think about like the LGBTQ pride parade, and I don't, oh, and the women's march, those sort of things, I almost feel like people, at least here from the States perspective, I would say, because that's where I'm at, people would use that as an excuse to be like, oh yeah, well, they can do that because they're at the gay pride parade. They can do that because they're at the women's march, but they're just doing that to prove a point. I see a normalized nudity parade where it's specific to naturism. So then it's not attached to something else, where it's like, no, this is just a parade to promote the naturism, the normalization of nudity. And I feel like, like if there was a way to take it to something like that, then that also would help to start to change people to not attach it to something else, where
I think there is a way. It's just no one has decided to do it yet, but that could soon change.
Yeah, because that would be really cool. And
I don't want to give any details away yet, wink, wink, but it's something I've had on my mind.
Cool. Fantastic. Well, you'll have to definitely keep me posted on that, because I would be very interested in participating in something like that. So
I think it's a first step to being more publicly recognized and known, and getting the conversation on why the body is wrong, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that are going to be upset, and I want them to be upset, because that would cause them to react against it, and then society is going to react in favor of it, because it's like, well, is it a big deal? Is it harmful? So it starts a conversation, and we need to start a conversation in order for things to change.
Absolutely.
So before we go, can you tell us a little bit about your short film, and what was the intention behind, and how you used nudity to illustrate a very important point?
Right. So I had decided that I was going to shave my hair. And I was like, if I'm shaving my head, I want to use it. I want to use it for something, and being an actor. And what I realized through starting to brainstorm on it was how much society attaches stereotypes to, going back to like judgment, right? And that all ties into the nudity and the female sexuality and equality. All of it sort of ties, I sort of found that it all ties in together. And so I decided I was going to do this short film about exactly that, for Women's Equality Day, for the 100th day. It was like the 100 years since women won the right to vote. And yet here we are, and we're still not equal. So I did the short film, and it is about exactly what we've been talking about this whole time, is about how we perceive others, how we make snap judgments about someone and the way they look, and how those judgments affect how we perceive women and the female body. And so, keeping us unequal is truly keeping us suppressed. Not just women, as society, because obviously it affects men too. It affects toxic masculinity, right? It affects how men view women. And like you'd said earlier about, seeing them hypersexualized versus just as, a normal nude body. So I did the film to just try to bring awareness to how we're still not equal yet, and nudity actually still suppresses us, and that once we release our judgments and stereotypes of people, then we can be more open and accepting of ourselves and others.
And what was the reaction to that?
I got a lot of positive feedback. I got a lot, the thing I found about nudity is people who are uncomfortable with it, they tend to just disappear. Like they don't say anything.
Really?
So it's really interesting to me. The people that are super uncomfortable with my nudity tend to just kind of disappear. There'll be a couple, people that have been like, spoken out about it in negative ways, like, like we talked about earlier, like, oh, you're just trying to get attention. Like, you don't have to sell yourself out. To which I promptly put them in their place, about how, number one, that's a very damaging perspective to come at someone who's comfortable within their nudity and say something like that. And then I forget where I was going with that, but for the most part, I got very positive feedback. So yeah, I had like some thought where I was going and I totally lost
That's
it.
okay. That's okay. I thought it was a really great idea. I really liked the execution of it, and I'm looking forward for you to continue through the type of advocacy that you have been doing. I think sharing your story is very powerful, and the more you share it, the more people that you can inspire, and the better world that we could eventually evolve into. So I want to thank you very much, Karma, for participating in the podcast. As I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, people can find you on Twitter at Karma McCain, and the video that we were talking about is actually your pinned tweet. So if they want to find that video, they can view it there. And also you can find her on Instagram as Karma McCain VIP. And if you're interested in watching any of her movies or series, you can find her on imdb.com. So thank you. And I want to thank everyone for watching this episode of A Naked Conversation With. I'll see you guys in the next video, and all the links to what we talked about will be in the description of this video.